how lovely that we have roses in the background in October. How wonderful. It's October, nearly the end of October, and feel very fortunate to be sat with there they are, the roses in the background, to talk about a subject that's really close to my heart, and that is perfectionism, self-judgment, and confidence, really, and how those three concepts join to each other and how they connect to each other. So I always say that I think that babies are born with innate confidence. There's no sense of a baby giving an actual chuff about what anybody else thinks at all. Like, a baby just lives life, and I always say, who's first on the dance floor at the wedding? It's those toddlers, isn't it? They haven't learnt yet, and that's the key, really. That is to see that this, this feeling of lack, and the word, how we talk about confidence is extremely lack-based, isn't it? I've lost my confidence. I need to get more confidence. I don't have enough confidence. It's all about lack. There's a real sense of lack. And really, more and more I see now that it is, it's something that's already there. And then, because of course we've all experienced this feeling of lack around it, that we, once we've started to grow up, and people have, let's take the dancing on the dance floor thing, that sense of, so somebody's told us we're not very good at dancing, and making a fool of ourselves and all that kind of thing. So gradually that confidence that was there, this process that I've begun to call transference, I've made it up. It could actually be a phrase that somebody else uses. But as far as I know, I've made up this process where that voice outside us, the critical, negative voice, it sort of melds into us. It transfers into us. And at some point, probably, about 5 years old, we become aware that there's a voice in our head. There's this thought thing, and at 5 years old we probably don't even distinguish it as being anything in particular, but there is a voice. There suddenly is a voice there, and that voice isn't saying very nice things to us a lot of the time. And that is where, the self-judgment and the perfectionism come in. Because that's the voice we then listen to. Instead of, for me, when I think about dancing and music, and I'm seeing this a big, thing for me, like, when I hear music, my body automatically just, my feet start tapping, I just naturally feel like moving when I hear music. And yet, how many of us don't do that until we've had 17 glasses of wine? No, perhaps not. I've never drunk 17 glasses of wine. I'd probably be hospitalised. Then until we've had a drink, or until we've had something to help us relax, we don't feel like we can dance, because what we're doing really is listening to that judgmental voice in our heads, that one that has been transferred in there because somebody at some point said, you look a bit of an idiot on the dance floor tonight, or whatever. And then alongside that is, there's this continual narrative of, well, this isn't quite perfect, it's not quite good enough, I look like an idiot, I'm not wearing the right clothes, perhaps. And there's almost like this transference out as well, in that we think that what we're thinking is truly in somebody else's head, that it's truly there, that voice that we're listening to is truly in somebody. We think they're thinking that, and that's truly it's truly what they think. Now that is something I say very often to clients I'm working with who perhaps having difficulties with relationships, or having these kind of self-judgmental and perfectionist thoughts, is that if you think you know what somebody else is thinking, you are 100% of the time wrong. That's a lens to kind of put on your life. You cannot, absolutely cannot know what somebody else is thinking. It's just not possible. It's just not true. And what you're thinking is to do with really what you think about yourself or what you think about that situation. It is not to do with the other person. It's such it's such an interesting, I don't know, thing that we spend so much time in other people's heads, thinking we know what they're thinking, and really that is really just our own self-judgmental voice. And sometimes, absolutely, it probably sounds like your own self-judgment voice and your own perfectionism. Of course it does. But then other times you may project that. Projection is probably a good word actually for that. You may project that onto somebody else, and you may think that it's actually them who are thinking that about you. And it's really just seeing that none of it is true. And you know, I always encourage you to, you know, to get back into the body, to just like stop for a minute. Like, the pause is so powerful here. What do you feel, you know, when you think those awful thoughts about yourself, when you think you're not perfect enough, whatever that means, when you're engaged in self-judgmental thinking, what does that feel like in your body? You know, even now when I just pause for a minute there, I can feel a little bit of tension because I've been talking quite fast, and I get a little bit like, people need to know this, passionate about things, and you know, because I love to help people with this stuff. And you know, I can feel there's a little bit of tension that's falling away now that I've noticed it, and there's no judgment for that either. Because that's the other thing I think comes out, is that when you're in a conversation like this, when you're being coached, when you're being helped, and you're on some kind of journey to try and feel better, the self-judgment can really ramp up a notch. I've noticed that, well, you know, people might, I noticed this a lot when I used to volunteer in a coaching space regularly, and people often came up into the room very upset, because they were upset, and the self-judgment there was, well, I'm on this spiritual journey, I should know better by now, I shouldn't be still getting upset by things. Well, the irony of that is that who's choosing? Your choices are being made, but there is not. You can't choose that. It's just sometimes at some point things look different, and then there's a different choice, or there appears to be a different choice available to us. That is not something that you get to decide. Now, I absolutely do believe that spending time in conversations like this, spending time in communities or whatever that are discussing this kind of thing, who are helping you to see this from a different perspective, like I'm sharing with you today, I absolutely do think there's a space for that. It's been beyond transformational for me and the people that I've worked with in terms of life, just looking completely differently, and that's available. But if then that becomes another space for perfectionism and self-judgment to come in, then watch out for that. And I do think that that's very common in the high achieving, you know, when you are a high achieving individual, a high achieving woman, then self-development can just become yet another space for you to beat yourself up, and for you to be self-judgmental, and for you to take perfectionism. It's like taking perfectionism and self-judgment to a different level, really. So I really do just watch out for that coming up as you're engaging in this kind of work. Because I've been through that myself. I was heavily involved in a lot of self-development, and really, oh God, I was obsessed with getting it right. And then the frustration and the self-judgment when it didn't seem to be working, in inverted commas, that was mind-blowingly frustrating. It really was really hard. A lot of the time. So hopefully that's helpful, little exploration there around, you know, realising that confidence is this innate state, really, that you can do absolutely anything. Because when we say we want to feel confident, what we mean is we want to do things without feeling bad. That's pretty much it, isn't it? And that, you know, that self-judgment and perfectionism are learnt and they're not true, and that your body's going to let you know when you're believing them and they're not true. So yeah, thank you so much for checking in and listening and watching, and please, you know, drop a like or check out some of my other videos. Take care. Lots of love.